Chapter 20 Daydreams and Nightmares. May didn't remember falling asleep, but when she awoke, she was startled at how warm she was, and when her eyes fluttered open, she found herself sandwiched between soft, black velvet and smooth scales. "Raven?" she squeaked in fright. The dragon pulled back his massive wings, and she winced as bright rays of light beamed down onto her from over the berm of the ash circle. Raven craned his long neck, tilted his head to the side, and glanced down at her with his big, shimmering, liquid silver eyes, as if she was some sort of hatchling fresh from the egg. "Hey!" May exclaimed. While she had been sleeping, Raven had plucked her up and placed her into his nest without her permission. The large bulldrake merely snorted at the noisy creature's ingratitude. With nimble dexterity, the dragon used his tail to pick her up and drop her on top of the outer rim of the ashen mound. "You could have squished me!" she exclaimed. Raven chortled at the thought as he slowly unraveled himself, rose to his feet, and lazily meandered toward the landing bridge. The dragon flexed his wings to their zenith, reared up onto his hind legs, and gauged the wind as he took in the morning smells. May chased after him. "Raven, I'm sorry, you don't have to leave," she exclaimed. The lithy, armored, plated swan-like neck pivoted around, and the big, daunting black face with the bristly crown of black horns peeked under its wing. May suddenly got a vision of a large tree stump he found floating out in the ocean. This vision was placed next to the crude form of her brush. To him, it was just a little twig. Therefore, he would replace it with a bigger one, and then she would be happy. And if she wasn't happy, she would be more than compensated. "But I don't want a big log. What am I going to do with it?" she demanded. Raven tilted his head. May frowned. She got the vision of herself gnawing on it. "No, I don't like sticks." Raven blinked. He was clearly puzzled as to why she had even made such a big fuss over him eating the stupid brush to begin with. This seemed to perk up the dragon's interest as he swiveled his head around and self-consciously glanced about his scaly chest and then back at her. A strange guttural, fluted whistle rumbled deep from within his chest, resonated through his long neck, and rolled off his blue tongue. "Nope. Not until you take me flying," May insisted. Raven's demeanor soured, and his big eyes narrowed. He would not let this silly little creature ride on top of him. May stuck out her tongue, folded her arms, and with a very dissatisfied harumph, turned away. Raven snorted and stubbornly fixed his gaze onto the horizon. His front right paw rasped against the stones and stamped down hard. May mimicked him and stamped her foot down as well. The dragon blinked and crooked his head, trying to look at her. May stubbornly whipped her head around, refusing to look at him. Raven chortled in amusement. May let out a frustrated sigh, albeit when she was about to give up and go back inside and fix some breakfast, the same sneaky, powerful, dexterous tail that had pulled her into the nest while she was asleep coiled around her ankles. May screamed as she desperately grasped at the smooth stone tiles, as she screamed until Founder's Keep turned into a tiny speck below, and she screamed until there was no more air to scream. After the initial shock wore off, she helplessly glanced about as she bounced along the big, fluffy white clouds. They flew higher and higher until they sailed past the sun and the moon. May gasped in wonder as the bright stars began to dance and to sing all around her, in a beautiful chorus, which didn't make any sense at all, but it didn't have to because it was all a dream. Irene gently shook her awake. When May's eyes fluttered open, she glanced about, disappointed to find that she was still curled up right where she had been, and Raven was still dozing inside his nest. Irene smiled. "How are you?" she whispered. May squinted her eyes and let out a long, heavy sigh. "I was dreaming," she mumbled. Irene smiled again. "Come, there is a lot to be done," she encouraged in a low whisper. "What are we doing?" May yawned. "You are going to bond with him," Irene declared. "Sort of like a magi would with her sword companion," she explained. May's eyes widened. "I didn't know you were a mage," she marveled. Irene smiled and lightly touched May's little nose. "Do you think everyone goes to Founder's Keep to learn magic?" she asked. May might have nodded, but the amused tone in Irene's voice indicated that was clearly the wrong answer. "You are—" She was about to say something rude, but Irene's sharp green eyes narrowed, and she quickly bridled her tongue before she said something foolish and hated herself forever. "Do you have a sword companion?" May asked in a low voice. "I have my dragon," she replied as she pulled out 8 small clay bowls from her satchel. May suddenly felt giddy and excited. "But will you ever pick one?" she ventured. To her surprise, Irene's jade-green eyes wandered, and a soft smile formed on her lips. "Perhaps," Irene replied dismissively, and then directed May to set the clay bowls around the raven's nest, and to alter each with a bit of sage in one and incense in the other. Once she was finished, May came scurrying back. "Who is it?" she cried. Irene quirked a dark, stern brow. May gulped. It was then a very tired and cranky Cora hissed impatiently at them through the hole in the wall. "I need you two ninnies to focus. Can you do that?" she scolded them. May gasped. She was stunned that Cora had stayed awake all night to watch over them, and she eagerly bobbed her head up and down. "What is the sage and incense for? I have never heard about this in the Founder's Keep," she asked in a low whisper. Irene struck a match and lit a candle. "The smoke from the burning sage and incense keeps dragons docile, sort of like smoke for bees," she explained, and motioned May to quietly light the incense and the sage. "After this, you will be entirely on your own," Irene warned. May accepted the candle and bit her lower lip. She looked toward Irene weirdly. Irene nodded toward Raven, giving her an impatient jade-green glower that sent her on her way. Her heart pounded inside her as she painstakingly moved from sage to incense, guarding the little flame until all 8 bowls were lit and the rich, sweet gray tendrils of smoke wafted into the air, filling the lobby. Once she was finished, May glanced back over toward Irene, but Irene didn't so much as blink. She just stared back with her usual disturbingly observant, calm green eyes and waited. Taking a deep, calming breath, May turned and knelt down on the ashen mound and fixed her attention on Raven's big, thorny head. One wrong move, and the dragon could quite easily fit her in his mouth and chomp her in half. Despite the danger, she couldn't help but admire the thorny black barbs growing under his chin. They weren't very big, but none of the other dragons that she had seen up close had them, not even Rex. May closed her eyes. She needed her full concentration. The only time she had ever soul-bonded any other living creature was at Founder's Keep. It had been the final assignment. It wasn't exactly as exciting or scary as it sounded, and she really couldn't compare the two at all. A poor little fruit fly in a jar was nothing compared to a dragon like Raven. As would be expected, the fruit fly didn't live long, and some of the girls even cried. One mender managed to resurrect the poor bug for 2 weeks, until finally she gave it a proper burial in the garden. Tesley was her name. She was a talented mender, but not exactly right in the head. She had nearly caught the whole girls' dormitory on fire for a silly spider. After that, Tesley had been moved to the specially gifted dormitory, which was made out of brick and a long way from everyone else. May had been sad when her pet fly had died. She hadn't been distraught. She understood that it was just a fly whose entire life lasted only a day. But it wasn't a pleasant feeling. She could feel it age, wither away within the hours, until finally she couldn't take it anymore, and she finally put the little bug out of its misery. She knew the whole exercise was to teach them that bonding with another creature was a very serious ordeal, and the little fruit fly in the jar would be nothing at all like a human, or a dragon for that matter. Mages often went raving mad when their sword companion died, and their guardians didn't fare much better. May remembered Toma, the old white-haired woman who haunted the library. She had lost her guardian ages ago, and she still talked to him even though he wasn't there. Nobody bothered poor old Magi Toma. She had a whole stack of books and charts from her library in her room, but not even the head librarian ever bothered to ask for them back. Once again, May cleared her thoughts and opened her mind and searched for Raven. She sensed him, and she smiled. In her mind's eye, in her head, she saw 2 surprised big silver eyes flutter open. May felt her heart skip a beat, as the dragon didn't seem at all a bit scared or angry at her. Raven was more curious. What was this silly creature doing inside his head, inside his dreams? "Hello, I'm May," she whispered as she reached out and gently stroked his snout. Raven's eyelids drooped as he yielded to her caress. "I like you. Do you like me?" May asked. Raven let out a soft, fluted, thrumming sound. "I wish you could stay forever," she whispered to him. She sent him images of endless heaps of ash for him to bathe and roll around in, of his scales being polished every day until they glowed like gems, and all the wild adventures they would have soaring through the air together. She sensed Raven yearning. She saw the eagerness in his silver eyes. But there was an awful, deep ache and a sadness in them. And then something strange happened that she hadn't ever experienced or heard of before. The slimy, dark, leech-like creature wriggled from Raven's nostrils. Irene grabbed May by the shoulder. In an instant, May was jolted back into the real world. Her eyes fluttered open. Cora called out to them. "Both of you get out now," she commanded. "No, wait, I can save him," May shrieked. But when she turned back, Raven's eyes had turned into deep, inky, black obsidian pools. May tried to reach out to him, to speak to him, but her Raven was gone. Cruel laughter and black smoke billowed out of the dragon's jaws. "Run!" Irene screamed. Cora watched helplessly as May turned and fled, but before she could get to the door, both young women were engulfed in flames. Tears ran down her face, and her voice grew hoarse as she shouted, "Loose! Bring it down! Bring it down!" At once, a storm of crossbow bolts and javelins rained down from the ceiling. The dragon answered back with fire. The upper rooms were flooded with flames and horrible screams. The recruits fled away, burning as they ran. Cora cursed bitterly as she took up a spear. But just as she was about to go out, a fuzzy-headed recruit barreled past her. It was Brumir. She recognized him, being carried on the stretcher from last night. "Idiot!" she cursed as she followed after him. But there was no calling him back. Brumir stood upright, out in the open, and he took aim. The entire room shook as the great bulldrake roared and reeled back as the crossbow bolt buried itself into its eye socket. "Irene! Irene!" May sobbed. Cora turned somehow, some way. May had not been harmed, but Irene, poor Irene, whom had dove on top of her to shield May with their magic, lay limp and unconscious, perhaps even dead. The gods only knew what it had cost her to shield May. "Son of Maltine!" Cora shrieked as she ran over toward the stone-faced Brumir, who was now winding up his crossbow. Cora grabbed him by his dirty gray tunic. "Help me get them out of here," she commanded. Brumir turned, and the moment he saw Irene, he scooped her up into his arms and followed Cora out of the kill zone and set her down by the steps. Once back inside, Cora gave May a quick look over. "Irene! Irene! I can't hear her thoughts!" May shrieked. "She's fine. She's just sleeping," Cora lied. "How are you? Are you hurt?" she asked. May shook her head. "It wasn't him! It wasn't Raven! Please don't kill him! It's not him!" she pleaded. Nora leaned forward, giving the hysterical young girl a kiss on the forehead. "Sleep," she whispered, and May's eyes rolled to the back of her head. With great care, Cora eased her gently to the floor, and then turned her attentions back over toward Irene, and then Brumir. Brumir stared up at her. Cora felt a lump in her throat. "She's fine. She's going to be fine," she assured him. "Do you know the way to Mender's Hall?" Of course he did, but she needed him to focus. Brumir nodded, and was about to kneel down to pick up Irene, but Cora stopped him. "No, she's fine, understand?" Cora insisted firmly. Tears ran down Brumir's ashen face. "Take this. Run to Mender's Hall. Show him this. Bring them here. Tell him Cora sent you. And if they won't come, I need you to take charge and bring the wounded to them. Can you do that?" Brumir nodded. Cora smiled and squeezed his hand. "You have done well. Now go. I will finish this," she assured him. While upstairs was an absolute hellscape of charred bodies and horrible screams, Torn and his recruits down below had just managed to clear out the holes that had been clogged full of ash that prevented them from attacking the dragon's soft underbelly with their spears and heavy-powered crossbows. But the moment they had an opening, they unleashed hell until the dragon's blood and gore came pouring through the murder holes. "Is it dead yet?" Torn called. Cora grimly strode forward with her spear in hand. The dragon lay on the ground, twisting and churning. She thrust her weapon into its remaining eye socket until the tip of the spear exited out the back of the dragon's skull. "It's dead," she called back. "But we have a lot of casualties up top," she added. "Did you see what went wrong?" Torn called up. Cora leaned against her staff and glanced down at Torn through the hole in the floor, and she shook her head. It was then she heard the haunted sound of alarm bells tolling off in the distance. At that moment, she knew that what Torn had been warning everyone about had come true, and while they had been hunkered down, the Droon had found their opening, and Glendon, Marne's capital city and trade hub, was under attack. Just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, several dark silhouettes of armed soldiers crested the landing bridge. It was a band of elite Droon raiders, and judging by what had happened with the dragon, there was most likely one or several other mages amongst them. "Torn," Cora called. Fire blossomed from the palms of her hand. "What?" "You were right." Elemental flames lapped at her fingertips as Cora grimly strode out to meet the enemy. "What do we do?" Milo exclaimed in panic. Torn cursed. "You two chowderheads come with me. The rest of you ugly sons of Maltine go up top and clean any of the scraps of Droon Cora leaves behind. Stay together. Don't die or I'll kill you again," he barked. "Where are we going?" Ben exclaimed. "We're going to war," Torn growled, and he pointed his gnarled fingers toward the bundle of heavy ballista bolts. "Grab as many as you can carry and follow me," he commanded, as he swung a heavy ballista bolt over one shoulder and the platform under his other arm. Meanwhile, up top, 6 other masked figures in all black crested the ledge, but the moment they became aware of Cora, they froze in their tracks. As they were still in the process of pulling their weapons from the longboats below. "Do you want to jump before you're on fire, or after?" Cora inquired. One man drew his dagger, but with a wave of her hand she set him ablaze. The Droon soldier wailed and shrieked wretchedly as he ran about, and his flesh sizzled and his eyes melted into his skull, until he blindly ran for the ledge, but only prolonged his suffering as he only succeeded in running in tight little circles. Altogether, the rest threw themselves off the stone bridge, and those that weren't crushed on the rocks below swam to their boats. Cora took grim satisfaction as she watched them shriek and writhe as one by one she set their boats and supplies ablaze, forcing whatever survivors that remained to swim, or at least try to swim. The current was strong, and their warships were too far away. Cora grimly used the butt end of her spear to shove the dead, blackened, crispy Droon off the bridge, and she strode over to the ledge, her eyes scanning for the mages responsible for killing so many of the young recruits. And Irene. Poor Irene. But as hard as she looked, she didn't see them. They had to be extremely powerful necromancers to control the bull drake from that far away. It had been a trap all along. The Droon necromancers had let the dreadful creature loose to hunt them down, like a falconer loosing its falcons to hunt them like quail. Cora suspected they had controlled the bull drake for months, perhaps even years prior to the attack. That was why May could not bond with it. The poor creature had been bonded already. These same necromancers had killed it too, hollowed it out like parasites killing their host before May could save him. There was nothing else Cora could do. She turned. She watched helplessly as smoke rose from the city. The Droon had brought more dragons, and they were wreaking havoc. She wanted to go fly out and assist Torn, but she knew better. If she did that, the back door to Founder's Keep would be open and exposed Even if 20 Droon managed to take Dragonhall alone, it would take hundreds of lives, perhaps even years, to push them back out again. That wasn't counting the dragons that would either be killed, stolen, or both. That was why the Droon had only sent a handful of elite soldiers to climb the cliffs. If they had succeeded in their plan, it would have been nearly impossible to take back the stronghold. If they failed, the casualties were relatively low. Yes, the Droon might have lost their bulldrake, but it still opened a vital gap, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. And Dragonhall had lost 3 of their invaluable members to their team: Don Raskel, Nora Frey, Irene Rivers. Cora winced as she mentally counted the casualties that she knew about. She dreaded what she would find up top. Adar Solston had been upstairs, and he had not called back down yet. Adar was a fellow mage, and he was always full of random quotes, and his room was full of books. Everyone teased him that they were purely for decoration. He had specialized in weather magic. Naturally, he and Torn did not get along. Cora had to insist that they be on separate levels. Torn, initially, thought Adar had gotten the best view because he had been a fellow mage, but Cora managed to convince him that if things did go horribly wrong, he would get a better target at the dragon's soft underparts, and if things went well, he would be closer to the wine cellar. Cora smiled. She was quite certain Adar was all right. He was probably busy tending to the wounded. He probably needed help. The moment Cora turned and went back inside, her nostrils were seared with the acrid smell of burnt flesh. The stone corridors echoed with shrill screams and whimpers as, one by one, the horribly maimed and wounded were taken out on stretchers. So many burns, so many awful burns. Finally, once the wounded were cleared out, Dragonhall became eerily quiet. The only noises were the muffled sobs of the living bringing out the charred remains of the dead. Cora watched helplessly. She turned to Irene. Her face was pale, like her life had completely drained from her. Determined to set an example to the rest of the recruits, Cora could not let herself weep. With as much serenity as she could muster, she knelt down and gently closed Irene's eyelids. "Sleep well," she whispered. Irene's long black eyelashes fluttered back open, and green eyes stared up at her. Cora gasped and recoiled her hand. This was not Cora's first dead body. Dead bodies did strange things. They twitched and made strange noises as they decomposed, and they stared up at you. To be absolutely certain, Cora's trembling fingers gently stroked Irene's ice-cold cheek, and then she felt the faintest cool trickle of air coming from her nostrils. She wasn't dead. Irene wasn't dead. Not yet, anyway. "Oh, gods!" Cora gasped as she stroked her cold, clammy forehead. With a glimmer of hope, she rose to her feet. "Hadar! Hadar, I need your help! Where is Magi Solston?" she exclaimed. Cora knew he was obviously busy. He was naturally dealing with heavy losses, but the dead could wait. Irene was alive. She had to get Irene to Mender's Hall immediately. She spotted Brumir. She could always spot Brumir from the crowd of his fuzzy heads. He was quite large compared to everyone else. Brumir's face was red and sweaty from helping carry the dozens of stretchers down the stone stairway. Judging by what little of the shriveled, blackened remains she could see beneath the blanket, they clearly were not in a hurry to get to Mender's Hall. She ran to him. "Where is Magi Hadar Stolson? Have you seen him?" she demanded. Brumir and the other bald-headed recruits stared at her with blank faces and haunted eyes. Cora's heart dropped like a rock as they lowered the stretcher. Gone was the distinguished, peppered gray beard. Gone were the hazel eyes. And the quiet smile. All gone. Just the blackened meat and shriveled sinew clinging to charred bone remained. The young, fuzzy-headed recruit stared up at her. Cora swallowed hard. She forced herself to think. This could have been anyone. And then she glanced down at the charred soles of the leather riding boots, and she turned toward Brumir and numbly accepted her ring back. "I'm so sorry, Magi. They wouldn't come. I showed them your ring, and I begged them, but they wouldn't come," Brumir apologized. "I need you to bring another stretcher," Cora insisted. "But Magi, there isn't any," the other recruits responded. Cora shuddered. She knew what needed to be done. She knelt. Her hands trembled as she grasped the sheet and pulled it over Adar's head. "Rest in peace, dear friend," she whispered as she gently rolled the disturbingly light, charred remains of him onto his side and pulled the stretcher out from beneath him. "Brumir, you've done so much. I only ask this one thing of you. Get Irene to Mender's Hall," she instructed. "But what about May?" Brumir asked. "She is resting," Cora assured him. "But you," he began. "Irene is dying. Move, quickly!" She snapped at him. As commanded, they hustled away, leaving Cora kneeling by Adar. She wanted to go out and fight, but who else was left? Cora had to stay. She was the only one whom the dragons knew and would follow if Glendon fell. The rest was all out of her hands. It was all up to what was left of Glendon's decimated fleet and their regular army. Of course, the field mages of Founders and Torin. Torin would be out there flying into hell alone. Pride, selfish pride, told him she should be out there with him to fight and die with him. But if they could not stop them, nothing would, and the only right and most useful thing she could do was instruct the recruits to hold out as long as possible so she could get their dragons to safety. She would tell the young recruits she would bring back help. This would be a lie, but the Droon would not take the dragons. Without the dragons, all of Marn would fall. But if she could save them, perhaps one day, perhaps even in a few years, she would see Glendon liberated again. Cora closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer. "Sprigga, grant us mercy. Varus, God of war, give us the strength to prevail." My name is Marco, and I am the author, narrator, and glee man for Founders Keep. I wrote this during the lockdowns, and it is an audiobook for free on my YouTube channel at Dragon Audiobooks if you want to read along. And if you absolutely love the book, you can get the hard copy, and you can get it in digital. The cool thing about this book is that you can share it with your friends. And you know J.R. Tolkien. Would you like to write him? You can't. He's gone. J.K. Rowling. You probably could messenger. She's a busy lady. She might get back to you. But me, I'm here to entertain you. I'm not just a writer. I am a glee man, if you will. And I do podcasts. I do audiobooks. So not only will you get this audiobook, you'll get all the other stuff that I put out on YouTube. And the most important thing, a sword. The most important thing, there will be dragons. There'll be lots of dragons. And most fantasy books, dragons have gone extinct. They're gone. These dragons are very much here and real. So there will be dragons. So Founders Keeps fancy fiction, magic, mages, swords, true love, revenge, dragon audiobooks. Follow me on Twitter, Dragon Audiobooks, YouTube.